If you smile at me like that again, I'm going to lock that door, clear this table, and show you exactly what a man does when he's spent a year praying for self-control he doesn't have." Those were the words that shattered everything I thought I knew. I stood there, teapot frozen in my hand, staring at the man I'd served every Tuesday and Friday for 11 months. Mr. Clark, the quiet one, the sad gentleman who read antique books and left ridiculously generous tips. The customer who asked about my grandmother, who remembered I was studying history, who made closing shifts at this old tea room feel less like work and more like I was keeping someone company. Except the man staring at me now, eyes black with hunger that made my thighs clench, voice low and raw like he was barely holding himself back from doing exactly what he'd just threatened, wasn't a gentleman at all. "I what?" My voice came out breathless. "Wrong." He stood, didn't ask permission, just rose from that corner booth like a king who'd been sitting on a throne this whole time and I'd been too blind to see it. "You heard me. Rachel." He said my name like a curse and a prayer tangled together. "You've been looking at me like that for months, like you want me to stop being polite, like you lie in bed at night imagining what my hands would feel like on your body. I don't." I stepped back. The counter hit my spine. He moved faster than I expected, closing the distance until I could feel the heat coming off him, until I could smell expensive cologne and something darker underneath. His hand came up, fingers wrapping around my wrist, thumb pressing into my racing pulse. "Yes, you do." His other hand reached past me and turned the lock on the front door. The click echoed through the empty room. "And I've spent 11 months sitting in that booth with my hands wrapped around a teacup instead of your throat, telling myself I was being honorable, that I was protecting you from what I am." The tea room was empty. Tuesday night, almost closing, snow falling outside. I was alone with him, and that realization hit me like ice water and fire at the same time. "Mr. Clark, you need to leave. Right now." "My name," he said softly, dangerously, his hand sliding from my wrist to my hip, "isn't Clark. It's Anthony Marico. And you need to understand something, sweet girl. I haven't been a customer. I've been a man trying not to claim what's already mine." The name punched through me. Anthony Marico. The Marico family. Chicago's ghost story. The crime empire that vanished 5 years ago, leaving bodies and legends behind. The exiled king everyone thought was dead. Welcome, dear family and friends. Now that you're settled and ready to unwind, please hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're joining us from. Tomorrow, we'll have another gentle story waiting for you. But for now, let's move forward in serenity. I remembered the first time he walked into the Harlow. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon. The kind of gray Chicago day where the cold seeps into your bones. I'd been wiping down tables, humming something I didn't remember the name of, when the bell above the door chimed. He stood there in the entrance, snow melting on his wool coat, and I'd felt it immediately. That pull, that sense that someone important had just walked into my small, safe world. He'd looked lost, broken, like a man who'd been wandering for years and finally found somewhere he could rest. "Just tea," he'd said when I approached, his voice quiet, careful, Earl Grey, and somewhere quiet to read, if you have it. I'd given him the corner booth, the one by the tall windows that nobody else wanted because it was too far from the fireplace. He'd smiled at me then, this sad, grateful smile that made my chest ache, and said, "Perfect." I hadn't known then that I was smiling back at a king in exile. Hadn't known that the gentle man with the haunted eyes had blood on his hands and a throne he'd walked away from. Hadn't known that every Tuesday and Friday for the next 11 months, he'd sit in that booth and watch me with the intensity of a man memorizing something he knew he couldn't keep. "You're lying," I said now, but I could see it. The expensive clothes that never fit the lonely widower story. The way other customers instinctively avoided his corner. The edge of a tattoo I'd glimpsed once under his collar and convinced myself was nothing. I wish I was. His hand on my hip tightened, pulling me an inch closer. "I've been coming here for a year because this tea room was the only place in this entire city that felt like sanctuary. Because you smiled at me the first day like I was just a man. Because I told myself I could be near you without touching you, without owning you, without doing all the filthy things I think about every time you lean over to pour my tea." Heat flooded my face, my body. I was just doing my job. "No." His forehead dropped closer to mine. "Your job is bringing tea with a polite smile. You did something else. You remembered how I take it without asking. You asked about my day like you cared. You gave me the corner booth even when the room was packed. You bit your lip when you thought I wasn't watching. You blushed when our fingers touched. You wanted this, Rachel. even if you didn't understand what this was. I don't. You do. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I forgot how to breathe. Do you know how many nights I've gone back to my cathedral and paced those cold stone floors trying to remember why I walked away from everything? How many times I've stood at my window staring at this city and told myself, you deserved better than a man with blood on his hands. His eyes burned into mine, and then you smiled at me tonight, offered me free pie because you thought I looked tired, looked at me like I matter. And I'm done, Rachel. I'm done pretending I can keep my hands off you. The door handle rattled violently. We both froze. Someone was slamming against the wood, trying to force it open. Anthony's face transformed. The hunger vanished, replaced by something ancient and terrifying. He moved me behind him with one hand, the other reaching inside his coat. The door splintered. 3 men burst in, young and cocky, wearing designer clothes that screamed new money. They saw us and grinned. Found you, Grandpa, the leader drawled, mocking Anthony's wool coat and silence, his eyes sliding to me. And you brought a toy. How sweet. He reached for me. I didn't see Anthony move. 1 second the man was reaching. The next there was a crack like a gunshot and he was on the ground screaming. His wrist bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. Anthony straightened his coat, pulled a heavy gold ring from his pocket and slid it on with deliberate slowness, the metal catching the light. The signet of the king. When he spoke, his voice was calm, dead calm. You broke the old laws, touched what's mine on sacred ground. He looked at the other 2 men who'd gone pale as ghosts. Go back to whoever sent you. Tell them the exiled king is done sleeping. And tell them if anyone comes near her again, I'll remind this city why they used to cross the street when they saw my family coming. They ran, grabbed their friend and fled into the snow, leaving only the sound of the wind and my ragged breathing. Anthony turned back to me slowly, and I saw it then. The shift. The mask he'd worn for 11 months was gone completely. This was the real man, the king, the wolf. I told you to run, Rachel. He stepped closer, backing me against the counter again, his hand cupping my face with devastating gentleness. Now they know about you, which means you're in danger, which means I can't let you go home, can't let you out of my sight. His thumb stroked my cheek, and despite everything, despite the violence I'd just witnessed, I leaned into his touch. You're coming with me. Tonight. And tomorrow you'll wake up and realize everything you thought you knew was a lie, including who you are. He grabbed my coat and my purse from the hook, wrapped the wool around my shoulders and shoved the strap into my hand, then guided me toward the back door. The snow was falling harder now, covering the city in white silence. And as I followed him into the cold Chicago night, leaving behind the only safe place I'd ever known, I realized the truth. The quiet man in the corner booth had never been quiet at all. He'd been a caged lion, and I'd just set him free. The cold hit me like a slap. Chicago winter at its cruelest, the kind that steals your breath and makes your lungs burn. Anthony's hand was firm on my lower back, guiding me through the narrow alley behind the Harlow, away from the streetlights and into shadows that felt alive. The snow muffled everything. Our footsteps, the distant traffic, even my racing heartbeat seemed quieter out here, like the city itself was holding its breath. Where are we going? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He didn't answer, just kept walking. His body a wall of heat beside me, his hand never leaving my back. Possessive, protective. I couldn't tell which, and that terrified me more than anything else that had happened tonight. We turned down another alley, then another, until I'd lost all sense of direction. The tea room was blocks behind us now. My grandmother's apartment was blocks in the opposite direction. My phone was still in my purse on the hook by the register. My keys, my life, everything I knew was disappearing into the snow behind us, and all I could do was follow this man who'd just broken someone's wrist without breaking a sweat. Anthony. I stopped walking, planted my feet. His hand fell away and he turned to face me. And God, even in the dim light from a distant street lamp, he was devastating. The trident tattoo on his neck was fully visible now, dark against his skin, a king's mark that probably meant death to anyone who saw it. His eyes were softer though, gentler than they had any right to be after what I'd just witnessed. I need to know where you're taking me. Somewhere safe. His voice was still that low rumble that did things to my stomach I didn't want to examine. Somewhere they can't reach you. He stepped closer and I didn't move back. Couldn't. Those men who came to the tea room? They're with the new regime. The ones who took over when I left. They've been looking for me for 5 years and now they know I'm alive. Which means they know about you. They don't know anything about me. I'm nobody. The words came out desperate. I serve tea. I take night classes. I live with my grandmother in a rent-controlled apartment. I'm not part of your world. You became part of my world the first time you smiled at me, Rachel. He reached up, brushing snow from my hair with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. And I'm sorry for that. Sorrier than you'll ever know. But standing here arguing won't change what happened tonight. They saw you with me. They saw me break bones to protect you. That makes you mine in their eyes. Which means you're either under my protection or you're a target they'll use to draw me out. The weight of it crashed over me. My normal life. Gone. Just like that. Because I'd smiled at a customer. Because I'd been kind. Because I'd fallen for a pair of sad eyes and never thought to question why a man who wore $1,000 coats was spending his evenings in a tea room that barely made rent. This isn't fair. No. He pulled his coat tighter around me, his fingers grazing my collarbone and making me shiver for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. It's not. But fair stopped mattering the moment I decided I wanted you more than I wanted peace. He turned and started walking again, and after a heartbeat of hesitation, I followed. Because what choice did I have? Going home meant putting my grandmother in danger. Going to the police meant trying to explain that I'd been serving tea to a dead man for a year. And some shameful, secret part of me didn't want to run. Wanted to see where this led. Wanted to know what it felt like to be claimed by a king. We walked for what felt like miles, but was probably only 10 blocks. The neighborhood changed. Older buildings, quieter streets, less light. And then he stopped in front of what I thought was an abandoned church. Stone walls, stained glass windows dark and empty, iron gates that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. "This is where you live?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is the cathedral." He produced a key from somewhere inside his coat and unlocked the gate. It swung open without a sound, well-oiled, despite its appearance of neglect. "It's been my home for 5 years, my fortress, my prison." He held the gate open for me, waiting. "And now it's yours too." I stepped through and he closed it behind us with a finality that made my chest tight. The courtyard was covered in snow, untouched and perfect. A stone path led to massive oak doors that looked like they could withstand an army. Anthony moved past me and unlocked them too, pushing them open to reveal darkness beyond. "I'll understand if you hate me tomorrow," he said quietly, not looking at me. "I'll understand if you spend tonight planning how to escape. But tonight, Rachel, you're safe. I promise you that, whatever else I am, whatever blood is on my hands, I will die before I let anyone hurt you." The words should have sounded dramatic, overdone. But the way he said them, low and certain and tired, made them feel like the most honest thing I'd ever heard. I walked past him into the darkness and heard the doors close behind us, the lock sliding home, and then light bloomed as he flipped a switch somewhere, and I forgot how to breathe. The inside of the cathedral was nothing like the outside. Warm golden light from wrought iron fixtures, stone floors covered in deep burgundy rugs, heavy furniture that looked antique and expensive, bookshelves lining the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes, a massive fireplace with embers still glowing red. It looked like a fortress and a sanctuary all at once, like a place designed for a king who'd given up his throne but couldn't quite give up the power. "It's beautiful," I whispered, turning in a slow circle. Anthony stood by the door, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "It's lonely," he corrected. "But maybe less so now." He shrugged off his coat and I saw the full extent of the tattoos running down his arms, disappearing under his shirt. Art and violence inked into his skin. "There's a guest room upstairs, clean sheets, private bathroom, everything you need." He moved toward the fireplace and added wood to the embers, his movements efficient and practiced. "Or you can sleep down here where it's warmer. Your choice." "Will you hurt me?" The question came out before I could stop it. He went completely still, his back to me, and for a long moment he didn't answer. Then he straightened and turned, and the look on his face was pure devastation. "No, Rachel, never. I'll burn this city to the ground before I let harm come to you, including from myself." He ran a hand through his hair, and I realized he looked exhausted, like holding himself back for a year had cost him something fundamental. "You're safe here, from everyone, even me. Especially me," I believed him. God help me, standing in his fortress, wearing his coat with my world in ruins behind me. I believed every word. And that scared me more than anything else that had happened tonight. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I lay in the guest room he'd shown me, on sheets that smelled like lavender and stone, staring at the vaulted ceiling and listening to the old building settle around me. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind through the gaps in the stone made my heart race. Somewhere below, I could hear Anthony moving, pacing, maybe, or standing guard. I didn't know which, and I was too afraid to find out. The clock on the nightstand said 3 a.m. when I finally gave up and climbed out of bed, wrapping the thick blanket around my shoulders like armor. The cathedral was different at night. Moonlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the stone floors. Blues and reds and golds that danced when clouds passed over the moon. It was beautiful and haunting, and so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat echoing off the walls. I moved through the main hall, my bare feet silent on the rugs, drawn by some instinct I didn't understand toward a door I hadn't noticed before. It was tucked behind one of the massive bookcases, partially hidden. The sacristy, maybe, or what used to be one when this place was still a church. The door was ajar, not locked, not even fully closed, like an invitation or a test. I pushed it open and stepped inside. It was smaller than the main hall, more intimate. A desk dominated the space, heavy and scarred with age. Papers scattered across its surface, a laptop that looked absurdly modern against the antique furniture, bookshelves lined with ledgers and files, and on the corner of the desk, in a simple silver frame, a photograph. I knew before I crossed the room what I would see, knew with the kind of certainty that comes from deep in your gut when your mind is still trying to catch up, but knowing didn't prepare me for the reality of it. The photograph was of me, not me now. Me at 14, gangly and awkward, wearing a yellow sundress I remembered my mother buying me for my birthday. I was in Lincoln Park, sitting on a bench with an ice cream cone, laughing at something off camera. I remembered that day, remembered the heat and the way the ice cream melted faster than I could eat it. Remembered my father sitting beside me, telling terrible jokes. It had been 2 weeks before he died. 2 weeks before the heart attack that the doctors said came out of nowhere but that I'd always suspected was something else. Something we weren't supposed to talk about. I took that photo from half a block away. Anthony's voice came from the doorway, quiet and resigned. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard, the frame feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I had a telephoto lens. You never saw me. None of you did. That was the point. He moved into the room and I heard him stop a few feet behind me, close but not touching. I was 25 years old. I'd been my family's enforcer for 7 years. I'd done things that would make you sick. Collected debts. Delivered messages. Removed problems. His voice was flat, factual, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized years ago. Your father owed my family money. A lot of money. He'd borrowed it to keep his business afloat, and then the business failed and he couldn't pay it back. The rules were clear. You don't pay. You pay another way. I finally turned to face him. He looked different in the moonlight. Older. The shadows under his eyes deeper. The lines around his mouth more pronounced. You were sent to kill him. It wasn't a question. He nodded once, slow and deliberate. Kill him. Send a message. Make sure everyone knew what happened when you crossed the Marico family. He moved to the window, staring out at the snow-covered courtyard like he couldn't bear to look at me. I watched your family for 3 days. Standard procedure. Learn the routines. Find the best time and place. Make it clean. His hands gripped the windowsill hard enough that his knuckles went white. And then I saw you. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I was afraid to unpack. I don't understand. My voice came out broken. What does that mean? You saw me? He turned back and the look on his face was pure anguish. I saw you laugh. Saw you help your mother carry groceries. Saw you sit in that park with your father and look at him like he hung the moon. He took a step toward me and stopped himself. Like getting closer would break something fragile, and I realized I couldn't do it. Couldn't take your father from you. Couldn't be the reason that light in your eyes died. So I paid the debt myself. $200,000. Wiped the slate clean. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. That's not possible. My father died of a heart attack, the doctors said. The doctors said what they were paid to say. Anthony's voice was gentle now. Careful, like he was explaining something to a child. Your father's heart attack was real. Rachel. Stress-induced. Probably from the knowledge that he'd put his family in danger by borrowing from people like us. But it would have been worse. So much worse. They would have made it brutal. Made it public. Made sure your mother and you understood the cost of failure. He moved closer, and this time he didn't stop until he was right in front of me. I paid the debt and I told my father I'd handled it. Then I started watching, making sure you were safe, that no one else came asking questions, that the new regime didn't discover what I'd done. For 10 years? The number felt impossible. Absurd. You've been watching me for 10 years? Not watching, protecting. He reached out slowly, giving me time to move away. And when I didn't, he took the photo frame from my shaking hands and set it back on the desk. I bought your grandmother's building when the landlord was going to sell it to developers. I made sure the neighborhood stayed safe. I paid off the medical bills when your mother got sick, routed through charities so you'd never know where the money came from. His eyes met mine and they were full of something raw and desperate. And a year ago, on the 10th anniversary of the day I spared your father, the weight of my exile became too much. I planned to end it that night. But first, I wanted to see you one last time up close. So I walked into a tea room that survived the Great Fire and I saw you again, all grown up, still laughing, still kind. And I thought maybe God was giving me a reason to stay alive. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man I'd been serving tea to wasn't a sad widower. He was the reason I still had a home, the reason my mother's last months hadn't been spent drowning in medical debt, the reason I'd survived it all. You should have told me. The words came out as a whisper. I deserve to know. You deserve to be free. He said it with such conviction that it hurt. You deserve to live your life without knowing that a killer was in love with you. That he'd been in love with you since you were 14 years old and he was too broken to deserve you but too selfish to stay away. The confession hung between us like a living thing. Love. He'd said love. And standing there in his sanctuary, surrounded by stone and stained glass and secrets that went back a decade, I realized I'd been an idiot. Every generous tip, every quiet question about my day, every time he'd shown up on a Tuesday or Friday without fail, even in blizzards, it had never been about tea. It had been about keeping me close enough to protect but far enough not to corrupt. I'm not 14 anymore, Anthony. My voice was stronger now, steadier. I'm not some child who needs protecting from the big bad world. I stepped closer and watched his jaw clench. I'm a woman who just found out that the man she thought she was being kind to has actually been saving her life for a decade. So you don't get to decide what I deserve anymore. You don't get to make choices for me. And you definitely don't get to stand there and act like your love is something I need to be protected from. I reached up and placed my hand on his chest, feeling his heart thundering beneath my palm. Maybe I get to decide if I want to be loved by a killer. Maybe I get to decide if the blood on your hands matters more than the fact that those same hands kept me alive. He stared at me like I'd just torn his world apart and rebuilt it in the same breath. And then his hand covered mine, pressing it harder against his heart. You're going to destroy me, Rachel Bryan. The words came out rough, almost broken. You're going to make me believe I deserve you, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift. He leaned down, his forehead touching mine, and in the colored moonlight from the stained glass, we looked like a painting, a king and his salvation, and I'm terrified of what I'll become when I finally let myself love you the way I've wanted to for 10 years. I pulled back first, had to, because standing there with his forehead pressed to mine, his heart thundering under my palm, I was seconds away from closing the distance between us completely. And I wasn't ready for that. Wasn't ready to cross the line between understanding what he'd done and accepting what it meant for who I was now. My grandmother. The words came out rushed, desperate for something normal to focus on. I need to call her. She'll be worried. I always call her before bed and it's past 3 in the morning and she'll think something happened to me. I stepped away and his hand fell from mine, leaving cold space where warmth had been. I need my phone. I need to go home. I need... Rachel. He said my name like a prayer and a command rolled together. Your grandmother is fine. She's safe. I promise you that. The certainty in his voice made me stop. Made me turn back to look at him. How could you possibly know that? But even as I asked, pieces were clicking into place. The way my grandmother never complained about the building maintenance. The way our rent had stayed the same for 5 years when everyone else in Chicago was being priced out. The way there were always police patrols on our block. More than anywhere else in the neighborhood. What did you do? He moved to the desk and pulled out a file folder, not hiding it, not ashamed. Just matter of fact. Like he was showing me receipts from the grocery store. Your building. 42 units. I bought it 5 years ago through a shell company. Kept the same management so no one would notice the change in ownership. He held the file out to me, and after a moment of hesitation, I took it. Inside were documents, deeds, transfer papers, all bearing the name of some corporation I'd never heard of but that clearly traced back to him. The boiler that broke last winter? I paid for a complete replacement, not just repairs. The woman in 3B who couldn't afford her rent after her husband died? I covered it through an assistance program that doesn't exist outside of that building. The security cameras in the lobby, the new locks on every door. The reason your neighborhood has stayed safe while every area around it has gone to hell. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. 5 years of maintenance records, rent subsidies, security upgrades. All of it hidden behind bureaucracy and shell companies and charitable organizations that were really just him. This is insane. My voice came out hollow. This is stalking, Anthony. This is devotion. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I couldn't be near you. Couldn't risk my family finding out about you and using you against me. So I did what I could from a distance. Made sure you had a safe place to live. Made sure your grandmother's medications were affordable through prescription assistance. Made sure the streetlights on your block always worked, and the snow was always plowed, and no one bothered the women walking home at night. He stepped closer and I didn't move away. Couldn't. You never struggled. Rachel, because I never let you struggle. And I'm not apologizing for that. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I regret keeping you safe, even if you hate me for how I did it. The weight of it settled over me like a blanket, heavy and suffocating and somehow comforting all at once. This man had been the invisible hand guiding my life for years. Every small miracle, every time things had worked out just when I thought they wouldn't, every moment I'd felt grateful for my luck. It hadn't been luck at all. It had been him. I don't hate you. The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise him. I should be terrified and angry and planning my escape. But all I can think is that for 10 years, you've been taking care of me and you never asked for anything in return. Never expected gratitude or acknowledgement. You just did it because you couldn't not do it. I closed the file and set it on the desk. That's not stalking, Anthony. That's something else entirely. His expression shifted. Relief mixed with something darker, hungrier. You need to eat. The subject change was abrupt, jarring. It's late, and you haven't had dinner, and standing here talking about feelings isn't going to change the fact that your body needs fuel. He moved toward the door and paused, glancing back. I'm going to cook. You can join me, or you can go back upstairs. Your choice. But either way, you're eating before you sleep. I followed him. Of course I followed him. Through the main hall and down a corridor I hadn't noticed before, into a kitchen that shouldn't have existed in a deconsecrated church but somehow did. Modern appliances hidden behind vintage facades. A massive wooden table that could seat 12, copper pots hanging from hooks on the ceiling. It smelled like herbs and old stone and something else. Something warm that I couldn't quite name. Anthony moved through the space like he'd done this 1,000 times, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, setting a pan on the stove. His movements were efficient, practiced, nothing wasted. I sat at the table and watched him work, and it felt strangely domestic, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with the confessions we'd just shared and everything to do with this moment. Him cooking for me in the middle of the night, me letting him. Where did you learn to cook? I asked, needing to fill the silence with something other than the sound of my heartbeat. He smiled, small and genuine. My mother. Before everything went to hell, she insisted all her sons know how to feed themselves. Said a man who couldn't cook was a man who'd always be dependent on someone else. He was making pasta, I realized. Something simple but from scratch. Rolling the dough with hands that I noticed for the first time were scarred, deep lines across his knuckles. Burns on his palms. The hands of a man who'd done violence but also survival. He caught me staring, and slowly, deliberately, he peeled off the leather gloves he always wore. Let me see the full extent of the damage. Every scar has a story, he said quietly. Most of them aren't pretty. Tell me one. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. He shook his head. Not tonight. Tonight I just want to feed you and pretend we're normal people having a late dinner after a long day. He finished the pasta and brought 2 plates to the table, sitting across from me. The food was perfect. Simple and rich, and exactly what I needed. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the clink of forks against plates, and then he reached across the table, his scarred hand hovering near my face, and I held my breath. Waiting. Wanting. His thumb brushed my cheekbone so lightly I almost thought I'd imagined it, and then he pulled back, that same restraint I'd seen in the tea room settling over his features like armor. I made a vow, he whispered, to God, that if he let me keep you safe, I wouldn't touch you, wouldn't corrupt you with what I am. His eyes met mine across the table. But you're making it very hard to keep that promise, Rachel. My phone buzzed at 6 in the morning. I'd finally fallen asleep on the couch in the main hall, wrapped in one of Anthony's blankets, and the sound jerked me awake with my heart already racing. Anthony was there instantly, moving from wherever he'd been, keeping watch, his hand outstretched. "Let me see it first." His voice was rough with exhaustion, and I wondered if he'd slept at all. I fumbled for my phone on the side table where he must have plugged it in at some point during the night. The screen showed 3 missed calls and 7 texts, all from Lisa. My Lisa, my coworker and best friend who covered my shifts when I had exams and brought me soup when I was sick and knew every detail of my boring, normal life. The texts were frantic. "Rachel, where are you? I'm so worried. Please call me. Something happened at the tea room. The police were asking about you. I think you're in danger. Please. I need to know you're okay." My thumb hovered over the call button and Anthony's hand closed over mine, stopping me. "Don't." The single word carried weight I didn't understand. "She's my friend, Anthony. She's worried about me." But even as I said it, something in his expression made my stomach turn. He took the phone gently from my hand and did something with it, his fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Lisa Martinez, 26. Moved to Chicago 14 months ago from Miami. Started working at the Harlow 2 weeks after she arrived. Became your friend within a month." He wasn't looking at the phone anymore. He was looking at me. "She asked you about me within the first week she knew you. Asked if the quiet man in the corner was your boyfriend. Asked how long he'd been coming. Asked what you knew about him." The memory surfaced, sharp and clear. Lisa bringing me coffee on a slow afternoon, nodding toward Anthony's booth with a curious smile. "Who's the mystery man? He's gorgeous in that tortured poet kind of way." I'd laughed it off. Told her he was just a regular, nothing special. But she'd kept asking, casually, over weeks and months. Questions that seemed like normal friend curiosity, but that I now realized had been pointed, specific. "You think she's spying on me?" The words felt absurd even as I said them. Anthony's expression was grim. "I think she was planted there to watch you, and the moment those men came into the tea room last night, the moment they confirmed I was alive, and that you were important to me, she called her real employer." He handed me back the phone. "Call her, but let me listen, please." My hands were shaking as I dialed. Lisa picked up on the first ring, her voice breathless with relief. "Oh my God. Rachel, where have you been? I've been losing my mind. The tea room is a crime scene. There's blood on the floor and broken glass everywhere, and the police said someone was attacked, and I thought..." Her voice broke convincingly. "I thought it was you." Every word sounded genuine, concerned, like the friend I'd trusted for over a year. "I'm fine," I managed. "I'm safe. I just need some time to..." "Where are you?" The question came too fast, too eager. "I can come get you. Bring you some clothes and your things. You shouldn't be alone right now." Anthony was doing something with a tablet, his face illuminated by the blue glow. And then he turned the screen toward me and I felt my world crack apart. It was a recording, audio only, Lisa's voice, unmistakable, talking to someone else. "He took her. Just like you said he would." They left through the back and I couldn't follow without being obvious. A pause. "Yes, I'm sure it was Anthony Marico. The tattoo was visible. He's alive and he's claimed the girl just like you predicted." Another voice responded, older, female, cold as winter. "Good. Let him think he's protecting her. Let him bring her to his sanctuary. A king is only dangerous when he has nothing to lose. But give him something to love? Give him a weakness?" A low laugh. "Then we own him completely." The phone slipped from my hand. Anthony caught it, ended the call, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in my ears. Lisa, my friend, the person I'd confided in about my stress over school, my worry about my grandmother, my secret thoughts about the quiet man in the corner booth. She'd been reporting everything, every smile, every blush, every moment I'd thought was private. "When?" My voice didn't sound like mine. "When did you know?" Anthony set the tablet down and moved closer, kneeling in front of where I sat frozen on the couch. 3 months ago, I had someone run a background check on everyone who worked at the tea room. Hers didn't add up. Too clean, too perfect. And the timing of her arrival, right after my mother started consolidating power in the vacuum I'd left. He reached for my hand and I let him take it, needing something solid to anchor me. "I should have told you, should have warned you. But I thought if I kept my distance, if I stayed disciplined, she wouldn't have anything real to report." "Your mother..." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The woman on the recording. That's your mother. He nodded slowly. Victoria Mariko, the Queen Mother. She's the one who wanted me back. Not because she loves me, but because a king without an heir creates instability. She's been looking for leverage, something to force me out of exile. His thumb stroked across my knuckles, and I handed it to her by falling in love with you. The tears came then, hot and angry and helpless. My friend wasn't my friend. My life wasn't my life. Everything I'd thought was real had been choreographed by people playing games I didn't understand. I don't know what's true anymore. The words came out broken. I don't know who I can trust or what's real or I'm real. Anthony's hands cupped my face, forcing me to look at him. This is real. Everything I've told you, everything I've done, it's real. I know your world just shattered, and I know you have every reason to doubt everything. But Rachel, I am not lying to you. I have never lied to you. His forehead pressed to mine, and I felt tears on his cheeks mixing with mine. You want to know what's true? You're true. This feeling in my chest that makes it hard to breathe when I look at you? That's true. The fact that I would burn this entire city down before I let anyone hurt you? That's true. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry that loving you put a target on your back. But I will fix this. I will end this. I promise you that. I broke then. Completely. Sobbed into his chest while he held me. Finally held me. His arms wrapped around me like he could shield me from the world with just his body. And maybe he could. Maybe that's what he'd been doing all along. I don't know how long I cried. Long enough that the light through the stained glass windows shifted from dawn gray to morning gold. Long enough that Anthony's shirt was soaked through and my throat was raw and the tears finally stopped coming because there was nothing left inside me to give. He held me through all of it, his hand moving in slow circles on my back, his breathing steady like he was trying to give me something to match my rhythm to. When I finally pulled back, his eyes were red-rimmed but dry, like he'd cried all his tears years ago and had none left for his own pain. We need to leave. His voice was rough but certain. The cathedral's compromised. If my mother knows about you, she knows I'd bring you here. We have maybe 6 hours before she makes her move. He stood and pulled me up with him, his hands steadying me when my legs felt uncertain. There's a place outside the city, the old family estate, the vineyard. It's been empty since I left, but the staff maintains it. We'll be safe there while I figure out our next move. I wanted to argue. Wanted to say that running seemed like admitting defeat. But the exhaustion in his face stopped me. This man had been fighting for 10 years. Fighting his family, his nature, his desire for me, and I'd just become another battle he had to win. The drive took 2 hours. Anthony's car was nothing like I'd expected. Not flashy or aggressive, but understated and fast. The kind of vehicle that could disappear in traffic or outrun pursuit depending on what the situation required. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other resting near the gear shift. Close enough to mine that I could feel the heat of his skin, but not quite touching. The city gave way to suburbs, and then to open land. Brown fields covered in snow and skeletal trees that looked like they were reaching for something they'd never touch. I grew up here, he said as we turned down a long private drive flanked by dead vines. Before Chicago, before the Empire, this was home. My brothers and I used to run through these fields in summer. My mother would throw parties that lasted days. It felt like we owned the world. His jaw clenched. We did own it. That was the problem. The estate rose from the snow like something out of a Gothic novel. Stone and timber and tall windows that reflected the gray sky. Beautiful and cold and somehow sad, like a monument to something that had died a long time ago. The front doors opened before we reached them, and a man in formal attire stood waiting. Old, maybe 70, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Master Anthony, we received word you'd be arriving. Everything has been prepared. The greeting felt genuine, safe. Anthony's hand found mine as we walked inside, and I felt him relax slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing. The interior was warm, a fire already crackling in a massive stone fireplace, the smell of wood smoke and old money and something cooking that made my empty stomach clench with hunger. Thank you, Bernard. Anthony's voice carried the weight of familiarity, of history between them. This is Rachel. She's under my protection. Anything she needs, you provide. The old butler bowed slightly. Of course. Dinner will be ready within the hour. I've prepared the master suite. He disappeared down a hallway, and I turned to Anthony, searching his face for any sign of the paranoia from this morning. You trust him? He nodded slowly. Bernard raised me. He's family in every way that matters. The words should have been comforting, should have made me feel safe, but something whispered at the back of my mind, a warning I couldn't quite name. Dinner was laid out in a formal dining room that could have seated 20 but felt intimate with just the two of us. Candlelight, fine china, food that looked like art on the plates. Bernard poured wine with practiced efficiency, the bottle old and expensive looking. Anthony lifted his glass by the stem, watching the liquid catch the light, and then he went completely still, his eyes fixed on the wine with an intensity that made my breath catch. He brought the glass closer, inhaled slowly, and I watched his entire body shift. The relaxation vanished, the safety evaporated. Sancti Spiritus. The words came out flat, dead. 1987. He looked up at Bernard, and the old man's kind expression hadn't changed, but something in the air had. This vintage is only served at Marico funerals, Bernard. You know that. You've poured it at 3. The glass shattered against the wall. Anthony moved before I could process what was happening, flipping the massive table with one arm and pulling me down behind it as the doors burst open. Not one person, 5, all wearing staff uniforms, all holding guns. Bernard's voice carried across the room, still warm, still kind, and somehow that made it worse. I'm sorry, Master Anthony, but the family needs you home. And she was right. You wouldn't come for power or money, but for her, the old man's eyes found me behind the overturned table. For her, you'd walk into hell itself. Anthony's hand was on my face, forcing me to look at him instead of the guns. Do you trust me? The question was urgent, desperate. I nodded because what else could I do? He grabbed the candelabra from where it had fallen, all 5 burning candles still lit, and hurled it into the fireplace. The flames caught something, oil maybe, and suddenly the room was filled with black smoke. Close your eyes and hold my hand. Don't let go no matter what you hear. His voice was in my ear and then we were moving, fast and low, away from the table and toward a wall. I couldn't see through the smoke. I heard shouting, the sound of furniture breaking, and then Anthony's hand found a seam in the wood paneling and pulled, and we were falling into darkness, into narrow stairs that spiraled down, into the earth beneath the vineyard. The tunnels were older than the house, older than Prohibition, stone walls slick with moisture, and the smell of earth that hadn't seen sunlight in a century. Anthony pulled me through the darkness with absolute certainty, every turn and fork in the passage memorized from childhood games of hide and seek that now seemed obscene in their innocence. Behind us I could hear shouting, muffled by stone and distance. They'd find the entrance eventually, but by then we'd be gone, emerging somewhere in the dead vineyard far from the house. The cold hit differently underground, wet and penetrating, seeping into my bones despite Anthony's coat still wrapped around my shoulders. My teeth were chattering by the time we reached the exit, a rusted ladder leading up to a wooden hatch that groaned when Anthony pushed it open. Snow fell into the tunnel, and with it, the sound of wind howling like something alive and furious. The blizzard had come from nowhere. Or maybe it had been building all day, and I'd been too consumed by betrayal and revelation to notice. Either way, the world above ground was white chaos, wind that stole breath, snow so thick I couldn't see 3 feet ahead. Anthony pulled me up and out, slammed the hatch closed, and immediately started moving, not toward the house, toward the tree line, toward where I assumed he'd hidden the car. But the storm was getting worse with every passing second, the temperature dropping so fast I could feel my exposed skin going numb. We need to get back to the city, he shouted over the wind, his arm around my waist, keeping me upright. There's a safe house on the north side. We can regroup there. We made it to the car, made it 10 miles down roads that were disappearing under snow before even Anthony had to admit defeat. The visibility was 0. The car was fishtailing on ice we couldn't see, and when the radio crackled to life with emergency warnings about the worst storm to hit Chicago in decades, about highways closing and shelters opening, he made the only choice he could. The cathedral. It's closer and I know every inch of it. We can wait out the storm there. His hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. My mother's people won't move in this weather. Too much risk. We'll have tonight at least. The cathedral looked different in the storm. Smaller somehow. More vulnerable. The iron gates were frozen shut, and Anthony had to kick them open, ice shattering like glass. The courtyard was knee-deep in snow and getting deeper. By the time we reached the oak doors, my legs were numb, and my lungs burned with cold. Inside was dark. Completely dark. Anthony tried the lights and nothing happened. She cut the power. His voice was grim in the blackness. She's hurting us, pushing us toward something. He found candles by memory, lit them with a lighter from his pocket, and the cathedral came alive in flickering gold. And that's when we smelled it. Smoke, not from inside. From outside, from the front doors that were starting to glow orange around the edges. They're burning us out. I couldn't believe how calm I sounded, how detached, like fear had finally exceeded my capacity to feel it and left me floating somewhere above my body. Anthony was already moving, checking exits, finding them all blocked or frozen shut. The windows are too high, and the glass is too thick. We're trapped. He said it like he was commenting on the weather, like this was just another problem to solve. And then I remembered. History of Chicago Architecture. The book I'd read during slow shifts at the tea room, the chapter on Prohibition-era buildings, and the secret tunnels that ran under half the city. The altar. My voice cut through his planning. During Prohibition, this was a speakeasy. They used the cathedral as a front and ran liquor through tunnels underneath. There's a hatch. I remember reading about it. I was already running toward the raised platform where the altar stood. Anthony right behind me. The smoke was getting thicker, seeping under the doors, and I could hear wood beginning to crack. My hands found the seam in the floor where stone met stone slightly wrong. Anthony's knife appeared from somewhere and he wedged it into the gap, prying up a section of floor that swung open on hidden hinges. Below was darkness and the smell of damp earth and salvation. We dropped down and pulled the hatch closed as the front doors finally gave way. The sound of flames was muted here, distant, safe. But the cold was worse, so much worse. The tunnels were freezing, the walls slick with ice, our breath coming out in clouds that disappeared into blackness. Anthony had the lighter out, using it sparingly to navigate, but I could see him starting to shake. Not from fear, from cold, from shock catching up with adrenaline. "We need to keep moving," he said through chattering teeth. "Find an exit before." His voice cut off as his legs buckled. I caught him, or tried to, but his weight was too much, and we went down together on the frozen stone floor. "Anthony!" I cupped his face and felt how cold his skin was. Too cold. Shock settling in. "Stay with me, please." I didn't think, just acted. Unbuttoned his coat with shaking fingers, then mine, pressing my body against his chest, wrapping both coats around us like a cocoon. The heat of our skin meeting through thin layers of clothing was almost painful. He made a sound, something between a gasp and a groan, and his arms came around me, pulling me closer. "Rachel." My name was a prayer and a warning. "We shouldn't, I can't." "Shut up." I pressed closer, my legs tangling with his, my face buried in his neck where I could feel his pulse thundering. "You've spent 10 years keeping your vow, making promises to God, being honorable." My lips brushed his throat and felt him shudder. "But we're going to die down here if we don't stay warm, and I'm not going to let you freeze to death because you're trying to be noble." His hands tightened on my back, fingers digging in through fabric. "This isn't about staying warm." His voice was raw, wrecked. "This is about the fact that I've wanted you in my arms for a year, and now that you're here, I don't know how to be gentle with you." "Then don't be." The words left my mouth before I could think about them, before I could be smart or careful or anything other than a woman who'd just realized she might die in the dark with the only person who'd ever truly seen her. His control snapped. I felt it break like ice cracking. His hand fisted in my hair and his mouth found mine in the darkness, and there was nothing gentle about it. He kissed me like he was drowning and I was air, like he'd been starving for years and I was the first meal he'd been offered. His teeth caught my bottom lip and I gasped, and he swallowed the sound, his tongue sweeping into my mouth, possessive and desperate and so completely overwhelming that I couldn't think past the taste of him. Wine and smoke, and something darker. His hand slid under my shirt, palm hot against my ribs, thumb brushing just below my breast, and I arched into the touch, wanting more, needing everything. I woke to gray light filtering through cracks in stone, and the smell of smoke still clinging to everything. Anthony's coat was wrapped around me, his body a warm wall at my back, his arm heavy across my waist. For a moment I just lay there, listening to him breathe, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my spine. The tunnels were silent now. No fire, no wind, just the two of us in the aftermath of survival and something else, something that had happened in the darkness that I wasn't ready to name but couldn't forget. His hand tightened on my hip and I knew he was awake. "We should move," he said quietly, his lips brushing my shoulder. "The fire will have died by now. We need to see what's left." What was left was ash and ruin. The cathedral's front doors were gone, just charred wood and twisted metal. The main hall was covered in soot, the beautiful rugs destroyed, but the structure had held. Stone didn't burn. Anthony moved through the space, checking for structural damage while I stood in the center of what had been our sanctuary and tried not to think about how small the distance was between safety and destruction. His phone rang, the sound jarring in the silence. He looked at the screen, and something dark crossed his face. "It's Marco, my cousin, the one who took over when I left." He answered on speaker, his voice flat. "What do you want?" "Uncle Anthony." The voice on the other end was young, cocky. "I hear you've been busy. Breaking wrists, burning vineyards. Very dramatic. Very you." A pause. "Grandmother wants to see you. Wants you to come home. Stop this exile nonsense and take your proper place." Anthony's jaw clenched. "Tell Victoria I'm not interested in her games." Marco laughed. "It's not a game anymore. You made it real the moment you claimed that girl. So here's the deal. You come in, you sit down, you have a conversation with the family like a civilized person. Or we keep coming, keep burning, keep taking until you've got nothing left to protect." The call ended. Anthony stood there staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. And then he moved to the altar, to the section of floor we'd used to escape last night. But instead of opening the tunnel, he moved to the stone wall behind the altar. He pressed a specific brick that looked identical to the others, and a panel slid aside, revealing a safe built into the foundation. He spun the combination with practiced ease and pulled out a leather-bound book. Old, heavy, the kind of ledger accountants used before computers. "This is my real weapon," he said, holding it up. "Not guns, not muscle. This, 20 years of my father's deals. Every favor owed, every judge bought, every senator compromised, every piece of leverage the Marico family ever had over the people who actually run this city." He set it on the altar like an offering. "Marco thinks he has power because he has territory and guns. But power isn't violence, Rachel. It's information. And this book is the key to everything." He turned to face me fully, and I saw the decision in his eyes. Whatever he was about to say would change things again. "There's something you need to know. About who you are. About why my mother is so desperate to use you against me." He crossed to where I stood and took my hands. "Your father. The debt he owed. It wasn't random. It wasn't just bad business decisions." His thumb stroked across my knuckles. "Your father was James Bryan. But your grandfather, your mother's father, was Antonio Russo." The name meant nothing to me for 3 seconds. Then memory clicked. History books, Chicago crime families, the Russos who'd controlled the South Side until they were wiped out in the territorial wars of the 70s. That's not possible. My mother's family was normal. Accountants and teachers and lies. His voice was gentle but certain. Antonio Russo had 3 children, 2 sons who died in the war, and 1 daughter who he sent away before the violence started, gave her a new name, a new life. Your mother, Rachel. She was Russo royalty, and she never told you because she was trying to protect you from exactly this. His hands tightened on mine. Which means you're not just some waitress I fell in love with. You're the last living heir to the Russo bloodline. You're royalty, Rachel. And if I marry you, if I unite the Marico and Russo claims, I don't just become king again. I become emperor. Untouchable. Unquestionable. The world tilted. I pulled my hands free and walked to the broken doors, needing air, needing space to process. My mother, a crime princess who'd hidden her past so well I'd never suspected. My father who'd died of stress from a debt that was really about bloodlines and territories I didn't understand. And me, not Rachel Bryan, history student and tea room waitress, but Rachel Russo, the last heir to a throne I'd never known existed. Is that why you love me? The question came out small. Because of what my name means? What I represent? He was behind me instantly, turning me to face him. I loved you when I thought you were nobody, when you were just a girl in a yellow dress eating ice cream with her father. I've loved you through every version of who you've been. His hand cupped my face. Finding out your royalty doesn't change how I feel. It just means that keeping you comes with a crown. The Chicago Opera House was a monument to old world grandeur. Red velvet seats rising in tiers toward a painted ceiling that depicted angels and demons locked in eternal battle. Anthony stood backstage, adjusting his cuffs with steady hands, while I struggled to breathe in the red silk dress Vincent had brought with him when the old guard arrived at dawn to secure the perimeter. It fit like it had been made for me, which it probably had. Cut low enough to be powerful, high enough to be dignified. The dress of a queen, not a waitress. You don't have to do this, he said for the third time, his eyes meeting mine in the mirror. You can wait here. Let me handle this alone. I turned to face him fully. You've been alone for 5 years. You're not doing this without me. The 5 families were already seated when we arrived. I could hear them through the heavy curtain. Marco's voice, young and arrogant. Victoria's, cold and calculating. Others I didn't recognize. Speaking in Italian and English, dividing territory like it was a business transaction, which I suppose it was. Anthony squeezed my hand once, then let go, and walked onto the stage, alone, unarmed, just a man in an expensive suit standing under stage lights that made him look both vulnerable and untouchable. The voices stopped. Marco laughed, the sound echoing through the empty seats. Look who finally decided to join us. The exiled king. Did you come to beg for your throne back, uncle? Or just to watch us carve up what's left of your legacy? Anthony didn't respond to the taunt. Just walked to center stage where someone had placed a metal barrel, flames already burning inside it. He reached into his coat, and I held my breath. But when his hand emerged, it wasn't holding a gun. It was holding the ledger. The gasps from the audience were audible. Victoria stood, her voice sharp. Anthony, don't be a fool. That book is the only leverage you have left. He looked at her, this woman who'd given birth to him and then tried to use his love against him, and smiled. It wasn't kind. I don't want to rule by blackmail, Mother. I don't want to own judges or control senators or have power because people are afraid of what I know. He held the ledger over the flames. I want to rule because I deserve to, because I understand something you never did. That real power isn't what you take. It's what people give you willingly. He dropped the ledger into the fire. The leather caught immediately, pages curling and blackening, 20 years of secrets turning to ash. Marco was already moving, his men drawing weapons, thinking Anthony had just made himself defenseless. And then the lights in the royal box blazed to life. I stepped forward into the glow, feeling every eye in the theater turn toward me. The red dress caught the light like blood and rubies. Behind me, emerging from the shadows, came 20 men. Old men with gray hair and steady hands and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. The old guard, the retired generals who'd served Anthony's father, who remembered when honor meant something, who'd been quietly waiting for someone worthy to follow again. Their leader, a man named Vincent who'd taught Anthony to shoot when he was 12, stepped forward and placed his hand over his heart. The old salute, the acknowledgement of a king, and one by one, like dominoes falling, the rest of the old guard followed. Marco's men looked at each other, uncertain. These were legends standing behind me, men who'd earned their respect through decades of loyalty and violence done right. When Vincent drew his weapon, not pointing it at anyone, just holding it ready, Marco's youngest soldier dropped his gun. Then another, until Marco stood alone, his power evaporating like smoke. Victoria tried one last time. You can't do this. The new regime is established. You're living in the past. Anthony walked toward the royal box, toward where I stood, and held out his hand. I took it and let him guide me down the stairs, onto the stage, into the center of everything. The past is where honor lives, Mother, and I'd rather rule from the past with a queen at my side than own the future alone. He turned to the audience, to the families who'd carved up his territory, and his voice carried to every corner of the theater. I'm reclaiming my throne, not with violence, not with blackmail, but with the support of men who remember what we used to stand for, and with a woman whose bloodline unites the oldest families in this city. He looked at me and I saw love and pride and relief in his eyes. The exiled king is dead, but Anthony Marico, first of the United Houses, is very much alive. Victoria was escorted out by 2 of the old guard, her protests fading as the doors closed behind her. Marco followed, stripped of his title and his guns, just a boy playing at being a king who'd finally been sent home. And standing there on that stage with Anthony's hand in mine and 20 loyal soldiers at our back, I realized this was what a bloodless coup looked like. Not violence, just power shifting to where it had always belonged. 1 week later, the Harlow reopened. Not to the public, just to us. I'd cleaned the broken glass and restocked the jams and brewed a fresh pot of Earl Grey. Anthony sat in his booth, the corner one by the tall windows, but this time he wasn't hiding. Wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was just waiting for me to bring him tea like I had 100 times before. I poured carefully, set the cup in front of him, and felt his hand catch mine before I could pull away. I told you to run, he said softly, that same warning from our first night, but without the threat behind it now. just truth. I smiled, the real smile that had started all of this, and laced my fingers through his. And I told you, I don't run. He pulled the signet ring from his pocket, heavy gold with the Marico trident etched into the surface, and slid it onto my finger. It was loose, heavy with gold, but I curled my fingers to keep it in place. It felt like it had been waiting for me all along. Then I guess you're stuck with me, Queen Rachel. Your grandmother is already being moved to the estate. She'll be safe there. The title should have sounded absurd, should have felt like playing pretend, but sitting in our tea room with snow falling outside and the old guard stationed on the street keeping watch, it felt exactly right. I leaned down and kissed him, soft and certain, tasting Earl Grey and promises and the beginning of something that felt like peace. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that its throne had changed hands, that a king had returned, that a tea room on the north side was now the true seat of power, and that sometimes the most dangerous love stories are the ones that start with a smile. Did you love this story of old world honor? If you want more stories about protective, brooding kings and the women who tame them, subscribe and turn on the bell. Tell me, would you have stayed in the cathedral,